Hello. Not gonna lie. Lots of things could go wrong right here. Real transparent. Mr. Raider in the kitchen. And it did take me about, I'm not, I'll say 4 minutes to figure out how to go live. Even though my precious fifth graders tried to show me earlier today. Hello, Cadence. How are you? I miss your face. And Donita, how are you, friends? Yeah, so we'll see how this works. I did ship the little dog upstairs because she tends to be squawky. But the puppies seem to be pretty chill right now. So we hopefully will be able to get through this okay. I miss you so much, Cadence. I hope that you're having a great time in middle school. I can't believe you're in middle school already. See, I got some other people. Who's Beepo? I'm trying to think of that. Haley Raider. How are you, love? I miss your face. Are you gonna stay around? Listen, we talked about pulled up the Instagram in class because we were trying to figure out how we're gonna make this work. And Miss Haley, your post came up first, so we've got discussions, I think, on that. Elizabeth, how are you, friend? Oh, Sage, show you the dogs. No, listen, this is I've got this contraption that holds my phone, and if I take it off, I'm not confident it's gonna go back. Sage, how are you? I'm so glad to see you. Anyway, I'll get started here in just a minute because I'm pretty confident I got a couple more kids that are going to join. And the Stinger girls. Hello, friends. I miss your faces too. Oh, golly. All these different. Let's see, who's that? I want to say that's. Oh, you pull up Instagram in the church? Haley. Haley says, goodbye. I have to listen in church. Nice. Hello, Miss Kaylee. All right, so I'm going to start. I think I told you guys probably have heard this either from your parents or from me that I love to read books and I love to read. And I thought I read an article. Oh, that's right, Cadence. And Donita, you are very important. I read an article about this awesome principal in, I think she was in Texas, that read a book to her entire students, like on a Facebook Live. Stop. I'm petting the dog so that he stays calm. She did it on a Facebook Live. Hey, Jace. And she read a picture book to her students every Tuesday night or whatever in her jammies, and it was really cool. And so it really inspired me because I have lots of fifth graders that don't do their homework and that don't read when they're supposed to read. And so I thought, hey, Victoria, I thought no better way for them to read or listen to reading than if I were to jump on and do a live. Now, fifth grade, I'm not cool because I'm old and everything I do is Facebook. So we're going to try and Insta. Yes, of course you do your homework. So we're going to do an Instagram live. And so then I'll save the video and I will post it to my feed. Right. And that's what we just got decided I need to do. I post it to my feed and I'll post it on Facebook and on Instagram so that if you miss a night, then you can come back and listen to it. But tonight, I'm going to start No Talking by Andrew Clements. He's an awesome writer. I really feel like I know my class. I think you'll like the style that he writes. I just think you'll like it. So I'm not telling you who doesn't do your homework. I'm not on the Insta. So this book is about fifth grade class that's known as the noisiest class in history of their school. Does that sound familiar? Anybody? Anybody? Right. Sounds totally like my class. We love to talk. So I'm going to start. Chase loves it. Great. It's a great book. So I'm going to read one, maybe two chapters. And it depends on how long, because I guess Instagram off after so long, maybe. I'm not sure. We'll see how this works. The first chapter is called Zipped. Dave Packer was in the middle of his his fourth hour of not talking. He was also in the middle of his social studies class on a Monday morning in the middle of November. And Laketon Elementary School was in the middle of the medium-sized town in the middle of New Jersey. There was a reason Dave was in the middle of his fourth hour of not talking, but this isn't the time to tell about it. This is the time to tell what he figured out in the middle of his social studies class. Dave figured out that not talking is extra hard at school. Can any of my class get an amen? And the reason? Teachers. Because at 11:35, Mrs. Overby clapped her hands and said, "Class, class, quiet down." Then she looked at her list and said, "Hey, Lindsay, you're next." So Dave nodded at Lindsay and stood up. It was time to present the report about India. But giving this report would ruin his experiment because Dave was trying to keep his mouth shut all day. He wanted to keep his lips zipped right up till the very end of the day, to not say one single word until the last bell rang at 10 after 3. And the reason Dave had decided to clam up? But it still isn't time to tell about that. This is the time to tell what he did about the report. Dave and Lindsay walked to the front of the room. Dave was supposed to begin the presentation by telling about the history of India. He looked down at his index cards, looked up at Mrs. Overby, looked out at the class, and he opened his mouth. But he didn't talk. He coughed. Dave coughed for about 10 seconds. Then he wiped his mouth, looked at his index cards again, looked at Mrs. Overby again, looked at the class again, opened his mouth again, and coughed some more. He coughed and coughed and coughed until his face was bright red and he was all bent over. Lindsay stood there, feeling helpless. Dave hadn't told her about his experiment, so all she could do was watch and listen to his horrible coughing. Lindsay's opinion of Dave had never been high, and it sank lower by the second. Here's a picture, you see? Check out her face. Now, let me tell you something. I don't know about you, but we have a constant conversation in my class about how sometimes you have to work with people you really don't care. And this was one of those times. Her face is cracking me up. Look. Mrs. Overby thought she knew what was happening with Dave. She had seen this before. Kids who got so nervous that they made themselves sick rather than talk in front of the class. It surprised her because Dave wasn't shy at all. Ever. In fact, none of this year's fifth graders were the least bit shy or nervous about talking. Ever. Sage, Victoria, Yes, we do that a lot. You guys are talkers. But the teacher took pity, and she said, "You'd better go get some water. You two can give your report later." Lindsay gave Dave a disgusted look and went back to her desk. Dave nodded at Mrs. Overby, coughed a few more times just for good measure, and hurried out of the room. And with Dave out in the hall getting a drink, it's the perfect time to tell why he was in the middle of his fourth hour of not talking, and why he had decided to keep quiet in the first place. Chapter 2, Gandhi. When something happens, there's usually a simple explanation, but that simple explanation is almost never the full story. Here's the simple explanation. David decided to stop talking for a whole day because of something he read in a book. See? Very simple, very clear. But it's not the whole story. So here's a little more. Dave and a partner had to prepare a report on India. Not a long one, just some basic facts. Something about the history, something about the government, something about the land and the industry, something about the Indian people and their culture, 5 minutes or less. Dave's report partner was Lindsay Burgess, and neither one of them was happy about that. There were some boy-girl problems at Laketon Elementary School. But this isn't the time to tell about that. That sounds familiar too, doesn't it? You need to stop calling people out on the Instagram stage. Even though Dave and Lindsay had to give their report together, they both agreed that they did not want to prepare it together. So they divided the topics in half and each worked alone. Dave was a good student, and he had found 2 books about India, and he had checked them out of the library. He hadn't read both books, not completely. He wasn't that good a student, but he had read parts of both books. Dave thought the most interesting section in each book was the part about how India became independent, how the country broke away from England to become a free nation, sort of like the United States did. And Dave thought the most interesting person in the story of India's independence was Mahatma Gandhi. Dave was amazed by Gandhi. This one skinny little man practically pushed the whole British army out of India all by himself. But he didn't use weapons or violence. He fought with words and ideas. It was an incredible story, all of it true. Let's just make a quick connection here. You know who that reminds me of? We talked a lot about Martin Luther King. Hello, Taylor. We talked a lot about Martin Luther King, and so he was also a peaceful protester. So Gandhi reminds me a lot. I made that connection when we were reading through here. And in one of the books, Dave read this about Gandhi. For many years, one day each week, Gandhi did not speak at all. Gandhi believed this was his mind. Here's a picture in there. That's a picture of Gandhi, or a drawing that represents Gandhi. Dave read that bit of information on Thursday afternoon, and he read it again on Sunday night as he prepared for his oral report. And it made him wonder, what would it be like to go a whole day without a single word? And Dave began to wonder if not talking would bring order to his mind too. In fact, Dave wondered what that meant, to bring order to his mind. Could something as simple as not talking change the way your mind worked? Seemed like it must have been good for Gandhi, but would it do for a regular kid in New Jersey? Would not talking make him smarter? Would he finally understand fractions? Sounds familiar, right, friends? If he had more order in his mind, would he be able to look at a sentence and see which word was an adverb instead of just guessing? And how about sports? Would someone with a more orderly mind be a better baseball player? Powerful questions. So Dave decided to zip his lip and give it a try. Was it hard for him to keep quiet? You bet, especially at first. Like when he got to the bus stop where his friends were arguing about why the Jets had lost to the Patriots. We're not even going to go down that road. But Dave had learned quickly that by nodding and smiling, by frowning and shrugging, by shaking his head, by giving a thumbs up or a high five, or even by just putting his hands in his coat pockets and turning away, not talking was possible. And by the time he'd ridden the bus to school, Dave had gotten pretty good at fitting in without speaking up. There. That explains what's going on a little better, and it's probably enough, at least for the moment. But there's more. There's always more. And now we're back in class on Monday with Dave, who got through the rest of social studies without saying a word. And when the bell rang at the end of the period, it was time for 5th grade lunch. More than 125 kids began hurrying toward the cafeteria, and by the time they got there, the 5th graders were already talking like crazy. All except one. You need to stop it, Victoria. You know my stance on the Patriots. You girls are cracking me up. Chapter 3, Insults. If you had to shut up for 5 minutes, I bet the whole top of your head would explode. As those words flew out of his mouth, Dave had 2 thoughts. First, he thought, darn it, because he remembered he'd been trying not to talk at all. And his second thought was, Gandhi probably wouldn't have said that, because it wasn't a very nice thing to say. But that's what Dave said, and he said it to Lindsay Burgess, and there was a reason he said it. So it's time to back up a little and explain. Dave had gotten through the lunch line without a peep. He had pointed at the pizza plate, then pointed at the fruit cup. He had nodded for yes, please, and shook his head for no, thanks. He had grabbed some milk from the cooler and flashed his lunch pass at Mrs. Vitelli, and he had smiled a lot. No talking? No problem. See, girls and boys, it can be done. You can do without talking. Then he'd sat down at the table with some of his friends, just like always. But instead of jumping into the conversation, Dave had to keep Dave had kept a pleasant look on his face, and he'd kept his mouth full of food. No talking, no problem. And because he wasn't talking, Dave had focused all his energy on listening. Listening at the lunch table, really listening, was a brand new experience for him because most of the time, Dave was a loudmouth. See, there's something more about Dave, and it makes Dave's reaction to Gandhi make much more sense. Because if Dave himself was a loudmouth, a real tongue flapper, then someone like Gandhi, who could keep completely quiet, would seem that much more amazing. Because Dave really did love to talk. I love to talk too. He could talk and talk and talk about almost anything. Baseball, cars, dinosaurs, rock hunting, soccer, snowboarding, water skiing, favorite books, best football players, camping, canoeing, PlayStation, Nintendo, Xbox, comic books, TV shows, movies, you name it. Dave had a long list of interests, and he had plenty of opinions. Plus, talking always made Dave feel like he was in charge. It was sort of like being a police officer out in the middle of traffic. As long as he did the talking, the traffic went the way he wanted it to. This was especially useful if insults started flying around. When he didn't have to put downs, Dave was a pro. But this lunchtime, all the other loudmouths were getting a chance to spot off. So Dave drank his milk and listened. And after a minute or two, he began listening to Lindsay Burgess, but only because he couldn't help it. Even though she was sitting behind him at the next table, and even though the cafeteria was almost bursting with noise, Lindsay had a sharp voice, the kind that cuts like a hacksaw. So I said, "Are you serious?" And she said, "What's wrong with you?" And I said, "Because I saw it first." And I did. And it was great color for me because my hair's brown and her hair's that mousy blonde color. But her mom was right there in the store. So she picked it up and took it over to her, and her mom bought it. Can you believe it? She knew I wanted that sweater more than anything. She bought it anyway. And then after school on Friday at soccer practice, she smiled at me like she wanted to be friends or something, as if, can you believe it? No, Dave couldn't believe it. He couldn't believe that anyone could flap and yap her mouth so fast and say so many words and be so boring and stupid sounding all at the same time. He took another bite of pizza and tried to stop listening, but Lindsay was just getting warmed up. Because then she comes over after practice and she says, "Here, this is for you." And she tries to give me the sweater. Thor. So I pull my hands away like she's holding a dead skunk or something. And I say, "You think I want that? That thing is so ugly. I would never wear it." She says, "Oh," just like that. "Oh." And she walks away with the sweater. Except now, I wish I hadn't said that because I really was the best color and it's really soft. By this point, Dave was wishing he had an iPod, because if he had one, and if it hadn't been against school rules, he would have plugged up both ears and cranked the volume. Anything to get away from the sound of Lindsay's voice. Because once I tried wearing this sweater that was made of wool, and it made my neck itch so much, like I couldn't even wear it for 2 minutes. But it was okay, because then my mom found this turtleneck way down at the bottom of the dresser, and I'd forgotten I even had it. It was pink, so then I put that on first, and then the sweater was fine, because really it was like the two colors went together perfectly, almost like a picture in a magazine. Because last week in Teen People, Jenna and Lori and Keith were at this party, like in Hollywood or somewhere, and Jenna had on a sweater that was almost like the wool I have, and she was wearing these. And that was the moment when Dave completely forgot about keeping and almost shouted, "If you had to shut up for 5, the top of your head would explode." And Dave was glad he'd said it, even if it wasn't nice, and even though it ended his experiment. Because after he said it, Lindsay stopped talking. But the quiet only lasted about 3 seconds. Lindsay said, "Is your cough all better? Because I thought I just heard a whiny little voice." She and her friend stared at Dave. "Did you say something?" "Yeah, I did." He said, "I said, I bet if you had to shut up for 5 minutes, the top of your head would explode like a volcano from all the hot gas that usually comes out of your mouth when you talk and talk and talk and never stop talking. Yeah, that's what I said to you." I'm pretty confident that would start some crazy fights in JC's defending me about something. I'll have to go back and Listen and read what she's defending me for. Lindsay tilted her head and looked at Dave, sort of the way a bird looks at a bug it's about to eat. Oh, like there's something wrong with talking? You never have any trouble with yourself blabbing and blabbing every day. We've all heard you. And the other girls nodded and made faces. Well, Dave said, talking's okay when there's stuff worth saying. Lindsay said, oh, so boys could say things like, hey, did you hear this guy got traded to that team and that guy got traded to this team and hey, he hit real good last year and oh yeah, he could really catch. Sometimes, is that it? Dave said, no, but I don't talk the way you talk, like for a million minutes in a row without stopping. And Dave was hunting for something strong to say, a real punchline, something that would shut Lindsay up and end this conversation. So he said, and anyway, boys never talk as much as girls do, ever. Lies. That is a lie. We all know that is a lie. Please take a careful look at this last thing Dave just said, because with this particular group of fifth graders, that's what they say. And now is a good time to tell a little more about the fifth grade boys and the fifth grade girls at Laketon Elementary School, to explain why it was a bad idea for Dave to say what he just said. Because Dave should have kept his mouth shut. He really should have. Alrighty, friends. Ooh, Jonathan, are you on here too? Lordy B. Well, I hope that you are getting a great intro to this book. The first 3 chapters, it went pretty quick, didn't it? Does anybody, I feel like we all can relate to this. Anybody? What are you guys talking about? We're not putting John here. What are we doing? I hope that you guys are getting into this book. Feel free to pick it up at they're pretty cheap on the Amazon, or you can rent them or borrow them from the library. You can read along with me if you like. I will be back on Wednesday at 7:30, and we'll read another. These chapters are really short, so maybe 2 or 3 chapters. I'm going to save our video and post it on my feed, right, Victoria and Sage? Isn't that what we decided? I'm so glad that you hopped on, Cadence, and all my friends. Jonathan, don't be a turd. I'm so glad you guys jumped on. I hope you really get into this book, and I will see you again on Wednesday. If you are one of my friends from school, if you put a note on here that you were here, I'll give you credit for reading for 20 minutes tonight. Hey. And get your homework done. Practice your vocab and your spelling. And have a great night. Love y'all.